The defense team finished up their close, and at the very end, attorney Mark Agnifilo asked the jury to acquit Sean Diddy Combs of all of the charges and to send him home to his family. And with that, you know, there are listening rooms because the main courtroom is packed. That's where I was this morning. And then there are these overflow rooms. There are multiple overflow rooms packed full of people from the public, from the media, so many people converging on New York City because of this trial. And in one of the rooms, I can confirm to you that when Mark Agnifilo finished, the room erupted in cheers. Everyone in the room started cheering, loudly clapping. When his closing argument was finished. Mark Agnifilo giving that close on behalf of Diddy's legal team. Numerous lawyers taking part in this process for him. And from what we understand, Diddy was quite pleased with that closing argument.
The courtroom is about to witness one of the most shocking closing arguments in the history of celebrity trials, with the future of one of the most powerful figures in entertainment hanging in the balance. The next few moments could change everything. Diddy, one of the biggest names in music, fashion, and entertainment, now faces a federal sex trafficking and racketeering trial that could result in decades behind bars. He's been accused of orchestrating a criminal enterprise involving sex trafficking, drug trafficking, and exploitation of women for years.
Now we're in the government's rebuttal. So that is currently taking place in the courthouse behind me. Diddy's trial happening at the very top floor of this building. We're in the Southern District of New York, and they actually have two federal courthouses, Michael and Ashley. This is one of them, the larger one. It is beautiful inside, and it is very hard to get a seat in that courtroom. But I will tell you, when I was in there this morning, Diddy looked to be in very good spirits. I saw him looking back at his children right before court started, giving them a big smile. And then during the break, when everybody was in the morning recess, people were milling about the courtroom and talking. The judge was off the bench, and I saw one of his twin daughters hand a piece of paper to attorney Tenny Garagos, Mark Garagos' daughter, who's one of the attorneys on the Diddy team. And she then handed that paper to Diddy, and he read whatever was on.
The allegations against him have turned the trial into one of the most watched and controversial legal proceedings in recent history. From being a hip-hop mogul and a media icon to facing accusations that could shatter his empire. The stakes couldn't be higher for Diddy. The trial has been a spectacle in every sense of the word, with testimony from key figures like Cassie Ventura, Diddy's ex-girlfriend, who has publicly detailed the abuse she suffered. Cassie has painted a disturbing picture of her time with Diddy, including claims of being coerced into participating in disturbing freak-off parties and enduring emotional and physical abuse.
On it, and then he turned back around, looked at his daughter, smiled really big, and did a little bit of a fist pump, like to indicate, yeah, whatever it was, he seemed to be very happy about it. His mom looked to be in good spirits. I saw her leaving the courtroom during the break. I said hello to her. She said hello back. They all seem to be really leaning on each other, relying on each other for support, as his freedom, Michael and Ashley, is on the line. If he's convicted of that sex trafficking charge, it could be 15 years mandatory minimum. And there are two of them, one pertaining to Cassie, as you know, and one pertaining to Jane. And if he's convicted of the racketeering, could potentially be life.
Julie, I gotta say, tell me if I'm wrong. I want to get your opinion on this. It seems to me the overriding theme.
Other witnesses have also shared their harrowing accounts, while Diddy's defense has continuously disputed the allegations, attempting to undermine the prosecution's case. The prosecution's case has been built around testimonies from victims and evidence that portrays Diddy as the orchestrator of a criminal enterprise. Their narrative paints him as the leader of a network that used force, fraud, and coercion to manipulate women into participating in sex trafficking and organized sex parties.
Of this closing argument by the defense was essentially that this was an overreach by the prosecution, that this was about the government going into somebody's bedroom, someone like Sean Diddy Combs, and although it's admittedly a bit of a bizarre sex life, it is his personal life. It didn't extend beyond that. Would you say that's a fair sort of assessment of the way they sort of characterized this approach to the prosecution?
Yes, Michael, you're exactly right. And I have to tell you both, Mark Agnifilo did a brilliant job connecting with the jury on that point. He is very engaging. His close was much different than the government's. The government, I have to say, while they were very thorough, very polished, very matter of fact, it was a little stiff.
With this case, the government is trying to establish that Diddy used his celebrity power to conceal illegal activities. They have presented videos and text messages to support their claims. with certain pieces of footage serving as graphic evidence of the abuse. The defense, on the other hand, has tried to deflect blame from Diddy, emphasizing that while he may have been involved in violent behavior toward his ex-partners, his lifestyle choices shouldn't be considered criminal.
He talks to the jury just like he would be talking to someone at the breakfast table, maybe someone in his family. He cracks little jokes, and one of them actually pertained to this point you just raised, Michael. So he was saying how the federal government essentially invaded Sean Combs's private life and turned his bedroom life into a crime scene. And he joked, and I have to tell you, I saw 3 jurors crack up when he said, "Thank goodness the federal government got all of that Astroglide off the streets. They went in and they seized all those bottles of Astroglide and baby oil. Thank goodness we are safe from all of that personal lubricant." And 3 jurors.
They argue that the women involved in the alleged sex trafficking were not forced or trafficked against their will but were consenting participants in what was, in their view, a mutually agreed upon lifestyle. The defense is leaning on the idea that this is a case of people not understanding or accepting Diddy's personal preferences, which he argues should not be criminalized. That, as the trial reaches its closing stages, the closing arguments will be critical in shaping the jury's final decision.
I saw all 3 of them, 2 women, younger black women, and then one, I would say middle-aged white man. All 3 of them cracked up and had big smiles on their face with that joke. And that was just one of the examples where we saw Mark Agnifilo really connecting with them and making this seem kind of ridiculous that the federal government would try to criminalize these desires to have sex involving multiple partners at hotels, using baby oil or whatever else they want to use. He described it as Diddy being not the only one making homemade porn, so to speak, that this was just his lifestyle. It was a valid lifestyle, Michael and Ashley, is what the defense team.
The prosecution will likely focus on reinforcing the severity of the charges, attempting to show the jury just how coordinated and systematic Diddy's alleged criminal activity was. They'll emphasize the fact that sex trafficking and racketeering are not just about individual acts, but about a long-standing enterprise that exploited vulnerable women for Diddy's gain. On the flip side, the defense's closing argument will aim to humanize Diddy.
Argued very strongly this morning.
And if you would, Julie, remind us too how he balanced that with admitting some of the things that Diddy has done that aren't okay, by using the video, for instance, and the domestic violence piece.
Sure, Judge, thank you for that. Yes, he acknowledged that Diddy committed terrible acts of domestic violence. And he went so far as to say if he were charged with those crimes, that he would be pleading guilty to them because he did them. And he said from the start of this trial, we've owned that.
Portraying him as a victim of a broken legal system that is overreaching in its attempt to criminalize his private life. The defense will focus on casting doubt on the credibility of the prosecution's witnesses, particularly the victims, and argue that the evidence presented does not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Diddy was involved in criminal enterprises. They may also attempt to frame Diddy as someone who has made mistakes but isn't guilty of the egregious crimes he's being accused of.
He did something that surprised me. I have to say, I thought he may kind of stay away from this hotel beating video, maybe just acknowledge it. He actually showed portions of it, Ashley and Michael, but not this portion right here that we're looking at. What he showed everyone was a cell phone in Cassie's hand when she initially left that hotel room. And you have to look really closely. I want you to pay attention to that mirror on the wall. It's going to be coming up on her right, our left, and you'll see the reflection of it. See it there? It looks like it has a white case. Hard to see. And look at Diddy's hands. Nothing in his hands as he goes to Cassie. So Mark Agnifilo used this.
The role of the jury in this trial cannot be underestimated. Diddy is a globally recognized celebrity, and the pressure on jurors to make an unbiased decision is immense. In trials like these, where the celebrity status of the defendant is so prominent, jurors may struggle with personal biases, which could influence their perception of the case. While Diddy is seen by many as a larger-than-life figure,
to say, hey, this was terrible, this was illegal, this was wrong and inexcusable. But it was not about bringing her back to the room to traffic her. Look at his hand now. He's got the phone. He said this was about retrieving that cell phone that she took when she shouldn't have. That's what he said. He said the phone he believes belonged to Diddy, and he believes that was the reason he got so enraged and went after her, and we saw that terrible attack. So that was quite an illuminating portion of the argument, I would say, because we've looked at that video I don't know how many dozens and dozens of times, and with her sweatshirt sleeve, unless you're looking at that mirror, it's really hard to see what she had in her hand or even to notice how he retrieved something. So
This trial presents an opportunity to examine how the justice system handles such cases, where fame and fortune intersect with serious criminal accusations. The implications of this trial extend far beyond the courtroom. If convicted, Diddy faces severe legal consequences, including the possibility of spending decades in prison. The charges he faces carry mandatory minimum sentences.
perhaps that argument will be effective, perhaps not, in terms of whether the jury considers it sex trafficking.
Julie, one final thing I wanted to ask. It kind of jumped out at me during the closing argument by the defense, and that was a point where Mark Agnifilo said basically, the winner in all this, because she got the $20 million, he talks about it, the real winner of all this is Cassie Ventura. And I kind of took a quick back, I was taken aback by that because of all that went on, look, you can get money. We do know some horrible things did in fact happen to her. He even copped to it, said, look, we admit.
Particularly for the sex trafficking count, which could result in a prison sentence of 15 years or more. In addition to the personal toll this would take on Diddy, his career and legacy would be irrevocably damaged. The entertainment world, where he has been a pioneering force for decades, would likely turn its back on him, leaving him a shadow of his former self. Diddy's personal life is also under intense scrutiny, with his
The domestic violence and the violence in the relationship, yet he called her the one winner. I wonder if you had any notice as how did the jurors react to that? I thought that might have been a misstep.
Michael, I'm so glad you brought that up. That was quite a moment. And I've got a little more for you both. Wait for this. So when he brought that up, he started with saying that this was not a quest for justice for Cassie, that this was a quest about money. And we all know about the $30 million lawsuit that she filed, which was the catalyst for this case. And Agnifilo argued that had it not been for that lawsuit, then we wouldn't have this federal case here and now. And when he noted that Cassie is the winner in all this,
relationships, past behavior, and public image all coming into focus during the trial. The defense team has tried to make a case that Diddy's lifestyle choices were not criminal, but the images of abuse and exploitation that have been presented to the jury paint a very different picture. The graphic nature of the evidence, including photos and videos, has struck a chord with many who have watched the trial unfold.
he said that Diddy is the loser because he's the one who wound up in jail. And Ashley and Michael, I was a little bit stunned at that because, as you both know, the government cannot mention that he's incarcerated. The judge cannot mention that. We usually don't see defense attorneys mentioning that, but here he did. He took a moment, he gestured toward his client, and he said to the jury, do you see that handsome man sitting behind Mr. Combs?
As the prosecution and defense prepare to present their closing arguments, all eyes are on the courtroom. The jury will be tasked with deciding whether Diddy's actions were those of a criminal mastermind, orchestrating a sex trafficking enterprise, or simply those of a man caught in a web of personal and professional mistakes that have led to his downfall. Whatever the outcome, the decision will have far-reaching consequences if Diddy is acquitted.
That man is a U.S. Marshal, and he said that man is one of the agents who's tasked with taking him to and from his jail cell every day. When Cassie won, and she's somewhere around the world right now with $30 million, Sean Combs is locked up behind bars. And so that was quite a moment for two reasons. The jury learned that Diddy's incarcerated. They had
He may walk away from the trial with his freedom intact, but his reputation will likely remain tarnished. On the other hand, if he is convicted, he faces the very real possibility of a long prison sentence. In either case, the trial has already altered the public perception of him, and the entertainment world may never look at him in the same way again. The closing arguments will likely serve as the final battle in this epic legal showdown, where each side presents their best case in an attempt to secure a verdict. The prosecution's focus will be on proving that Diddy's actions went far beyond his personal life and were part of a larger criminal operation that exploited women.
no idea. Now he sits in the courtroom every day in his sweaters, looking very nice. They never see him brought in or handcuffed. And then two, as you both know, we never heard what the settlement amount was. Seems to me that Mark Agnifilo might have let the cat out of the bag because we know she asked for $30 million, but it was settled for an undisclosed amount. But today he said that she is somewhere around the world $30 million richer.
Defense will continue to argue that the charges are an overreach and that the prosecution has failed to establish a clear link between Diddy and the alleged crimes. As the jury prepares to deliberate, the tension in the courtroom is palpable, with everyone waiting to see whether Diddy will walk free or face a future behind bars. The case has captivated the public's attention, with many following every development closely. The stakes are high, and the outcome will undoubtedly be one of the most talked about events in the entertainment industry for years to come.